Barov game with the white pieces, a victory for him versus Ellen Williams. It's a simul game, so as usual I like to pick those games because when there's a lot of difference in strength, I think it is even more clear what the strategies were. It's always clear, of course, in the minds of these great masters, but it doesn't always appear on the board what they wanted. When two very strong players face each other, sometimes, many times, their calculation simply rejects many of the variations. So you don't see on the board what was the problem with this move, what was the trouble with that move. And that's why I like simul games, because there it's a lot more visual. People make more mistakes, so we know how to exploit those mistakes. So let's begin with the game. Once again, excuse me for that, and just look at the board and listen to me. Don't look at me. I'll do like this. Don't look at me. Sicilian, and this is a side variation with b3. We don't really care about the opening as usual, but we will care about the middle game. This is a middle game show. You know that already. And in this position, I would like you to think, first of all, how would you develop your pieces? Of course, knight c3 is a tempting move, but in general, how do you want to place your pieces? Not only the b1 knight, but in general, and what would you play right now? So once you know how you want to place your pieces, and you know that the octopus knight is the topic, how do you think we can achieve that? What will be the next moves of white? Let's give you some time to think. Alright, I was trying to fix the video sound issue while you were thinking. I don't know if it helped. Let me know if it's any better. If not, just please look at the board and listen to me. Ignore the visuals. So, d4 is a great idea suggested by many of you. And of course, we want to, first of all, have the center just for us. d4 is a move that you want to play in most of the openings. Secondly, after this trade, we have jumped to the center with our knight. Also, we have opened the diagonal. We have somewhat opened the diagonal for the bishop. And even more importantly, we have opened the D file. So now that is a semi-open file. And you see that there is a hole in black's pawn structure on the D6 square. So yeah, octopus knight, maybe. Let's see what happened in the game. Bishop b7, knight c3. Of course, you want to develop your pieces first, and then you can start maneuvering. So, yeah. After rook c8, I give you just a few seconds to tell me the move. What do you think that Kasparov have played here? Good job, guys! I like that you're working together as a team. So I saw the suggestion knight cb5 by some of you, and it has immediately been corrected by the other fellows, saying that in that case the knight from c6 would capture on d4. So if you want to make sure that you will manage to create an octopus knight, don't allow knight exchanges. You want your knight on the board, and therefore the right move in this position is, well done, knight d b5. We are heading to d6, that's more than clear, but the question was which knight shall jump to b5, and this is the correct answer. Not that knight cb5 is a bad move, of course, but knight d b5 is even better. After knight takes, yeah, one of the knights have been traded, but he cannot prevent us from jumping to d6 because the c6 knight cannot trade for the b5 knight, nor it can protect the d6 square. So in that sense, knights can be either really good or quite clumsy. So the c6 knight is first of all pinned. So let's not forget that there's a pin on the long diagonal, and secondly, it would take lots of time for the c6 knight to maneuver to a square from which it would be actually protecting the d6 square. That would mean some crazy maneuver like, okay, maybe this is of course all silly, and the b7 bishop is hanging. I'm aware of that. I just want to show that it takes ages to try to do something like that. So of course, it will never happen. And black even provoked the knight jump by playing a6. Of course, he didn't want to lose his pawn. It is hanging because of the pin. So a6 was played, and of course, knight d6. And now, after bishop takes d6, this is the moment to decide how would you take back. So you know that we have learned about the octapawn, and I also mentioned that sometimes it's taking back with the piece. And today is the lecture when we are trying to discover the differences between these two options. So in this position, just forget everything that I have told you. Your gut feeling, what does it say? Your instinct, would you take back with the pawn or with the queen? None of them are bad, but please tell me what would you prefer in a real game. So this is you playing with the white pieces. How do you take back? As I said, neither of these options are bad. One of them is slightly better, and that is queen takes. Of course, e takes d6. If you like that move, you should play it. I'm not here to tell you not to play it. E takes d6. That pawn is great. We have learned about it. The difference between this position and many of the games that we saw last week is that the bishop is not suffering, the light squared bishop of black. So in many positions where we wanted to have this d6 pawn, the idea was that black had his bishop on c8. Sometimes he even had a pawn on c6, which meant that just by blocking his d7 pawn, we basically did not allow him develop the bishop. And if you cannot develop the bishop, then you have problems with the rook. So I know that this position is not that, but imagine that the black bishop, the light square bishop of black, would be on c8, the rook would be on a8, and there would be a pawn on c6. Now in that case, of course, you want a pawn on d6. You block it, you paralyze the queen side of black just by having a pawn on d6, so you cannot develop as black the bishop from c8. Now once this bishop is not there, so he has a nice bishop placement on the long diagonal, this d6 pawn is not causing that much trouble, but it is causing trouble. So of course it's great to have this pawn, always, whenever you can, go for it. But in this position it's even better to take back with the queen, because it means that you are now using this square, the weak square, with a piece, and you are not closing the semi-open d file. Now that is the big difference between the pawn capture and the queen capture. This is a backward pawn, that is a weak pawn, the d7 pawn. So now we are not playing against black's bishop. It's very likely that these pieces will be traded, our bishop for his bishop, but what we want to target is the d7 pawn, and that's a very weak pawn. It's so easy to attack it. You just bring all your heavy pieces to the d file, and he will have to suffer on the back rank and on the 7th rank trying to hang on to this pawn. So that is a big difference here. That's why queen takes is somewhat better. Slight difference, but it's somewhat better. And I see a suggestion by Christian that we could call this the... wait a second, I forgot. I just read it. Yeah, we had the octopus, we had the octopawn, and this is the octo queen. Yeah, it makes sense. I like the suggestion. So let's call it the octo queen. We have just coined this term officially. Write it down, new in the dictionary of chess players, octo queen, queen takes d6. We have a great octo queen. That's what Kasparov did. I don't know if he knew that it's called an octo queen, but he played queen takes d6. And after queen c7, important, how do you react to this move? I give you some time to think. It's not like it's a difficult move, but just try to familiarize yourself with this position for a few seconds and tell me what would you play with the white pieces. Alright, let's see what you guys have suggested. The natural response is often the best. So rook a d1 was played by Garry Kasparov. I see another suggestion that has a very similar idea, bishop a3, suggested by Simba. And I like that move as well, so that's a great idea too. The point is to take back on d6 with the piece, because remember, now we want to keep the d file for us. Sometimes it's great to have the pawn on d6, sometimes it's great to have a piece on d6, depending on what is your target. Now that our target is the d7 pawn, we want to make sure that when our queen is exchanged on d6, we can take back with a piece. Whether it's the bishop or the rook, that's up to you. So bishop a3 is also a great idea. Well done, Simba, and well done everybody who said rook a d1, because that is what Kasparov played in the game. Natural move, you are protecting the queen and at the same time attacking the d7 pawn. So black has to respond to this. He played rook f7, and now let's think again, because yes, we have an octa queen, yes, we have just played rook a d1, we have all our pieces very well placed, but what's next? And by what's next, I don't mean anything direct. Remember that when you have an octopus, an octapawn, an octaqueen, any of these strategic advantages, it's a strategic advantage. Let's emphasize that word. That means that it's a long-term advantage. You are not in a rush. So how would you start progressing in this position? There's no direct way to win it. Not even in 5 moves, perhaps not even in 10 moves. You are not winning on the spot. But you should create a way to improve further your position. Let's see, how would you do that? Let's discuss your ideas, because I have seen some great suggestions there. f4 is one of them, and that's what Kasparov played. You can also start doubling, tripling heavy pieces on the d file. So these two ideas are the main ideas in this position. f4 or rook d2 or rook e2. You want to bring all your heavy pieces to the d file, and you can combine these ideas. So f4 is a great way to strengthen the center. Not that the e5 pawn was hanging, but it's always great to strengthen it and to make sure that black can never push f4 himself. So why not fix the pawn structure and make sure that black will never ever have counterplay? So that's what Kasparov did, and next moves can be rook d2 and rook e d1. Just having lots of patience, because this position is lost for black because he cannot do anything. So you should really take this advantage this way. You are winning strategically. Let the opponent crack, because it really is difficult to play these positions when you are the one defending it. Just imagine you are playing this game with the black pieces. You can barely move your pieces. The queen cannot move from c7, basically it has no squares. The rook on f7 is tied down also to the defense of the d7 pawn. The c8 rook cannot move away because it's protecting the c7 queen, and so on and so on. So he can barely move his pieces, and that's why many times players lose these games very quickly, because they just crack because of the tension, because of the disadvantage that they are experiencing in the position. So of course this would win no matter what, but I'm saying that you can win these games also quickly because of the psychological factor that it's not easy to just do this with black. King h8, king g8, king h8, king g8, right? we always want to do something, and once you don't have a plan, once you don't have something to play for, that's a horrible feeling in chess, and that can make you lose immediately because you go for something desperate. So let's see if it happens in the game. Black goes knight d8, queen takes c7, rook takes c7, and after bishop d4, there's no way to protect the b6 pawn. So yeah, we can say that he lost immediately because he wanted to do something. You see, this is how easy it is to win strategically, not by doing anything. You just improve your pieces to the maximum, and then you keep on improving them, you keep on progressing. Of course, you should always have a plan. I'm not telling you that you should never do anything. You should have a plan, and you should keep on improving the position. But you can win directly because the opponent has to do something too. So he cannot say, your turn. He has to make a move. And after just an imprecision knight d8, this position is winning now on the spot because of the b6 pawn. So whether it's the pawn itself or that you play bishop b6, both are very annoying. And what happened was bishop takes g2, and now the intermediate move bishop takes b6. This is probably something that the black player missed. So here he has to move the rook, and then we capture on g2. Now one thing he could have done was rook b7, because if you are a pawn down, try to play a position with opposite colored bishops at least. I don't think that you have much chance to survive against Garry Kasparov, but in general, make sure that even when you are lost, when you have a disadvantage, whether it's material or whether it's strategically a disadvantage, just make sure that you put up a fight and you try to make it as tough for the opponent as possible. We have covered this topic, so if you were not here with us, check this video on YouTube where I talk about how to play when you are basically lost. It was one of the Halloween sessions, for instance, when we wanted to trick our opponent, and also we covered in another session, in a previous session, how to play when you have a disadvantage. So make sure that you always fight. That's when you are having the disadvantage. Now here we have a pawn up, we are white, and we have the semi-open d5 still. We still have lots of space, we still have greater pieces than the opponent, and yeah, the material up. So this position is of course winning too, but it's not as easy as this position where it is a super powerful bishop against a clumsy knight and the pawn down and passive rooks and a weak pawn on d7. Everything is bad for black's position. So yeah, he lost this game quite easily because, yeah, as I already said, I will not repeat myself. I guess I repeat myself often, so you must realize that I don't want to say it for a third time, but white is winning. And this is the last question that you will have to respond about this game, is that now that you have a pawn up and that you have great pieces, how do you progress in this position? What is the plan? So I don't want one single move. I would like a plan. How do you place your pieces as white? And that is the last question about this game. Well done, everybody. Yes, lots of great ideas. And you have basically guessed everything that Kasparov was about to play. He went rook e2, and the idea is what you guys have said, double rooks on the d5, so let's put all the pressure on this weak backward pawn. Then you also want to bring your king. You know that kings are important in the endgame, so bring it. Active king is important, and you can also expand on the queen side. You should prepare it, of course. Don't blunder your c4 pawn. But these are the long-term plans, short-term and long-term at the same time, because you are just doubling your rooks and then you bring your king. But it's a matter of when and how to expand on the queen side with the pawns. But first of all, if you double rooks on the d file, what does black do? How can he protect his d7 pawn? So that is an immediate threat that we just want to capture this d7 pawn. So what happened in the game was king f8, he has to bring his king as well to protect the pawn. Then Kasparov brought his king, bishop is hanging, so we bring it back. And after knight c5, now that this knight is threatening to become an active piece, not that it's that horrible, but finally it would have an outpost, Kasparov decided to simplify the position, and that is something that you should also have in mind when you have an advantage in the end game, that you many times will want to simplify. So you might hear that rook endgames are drawish even if you have a pawn up, but not this one. Your rooks are a lot better. The f7 rook is basically not doing anything. It's a giant pawn on f7. It's not doing a thing. It doesn't have open files. So his only piece is this c5 rook, which will now have to protect the other weakness. He has another weak pawn. So we are attacking the d7 pawn and the a6 pawn. And after rook a5, Kasparov simply protected his a2 pawn, and then he went on to win because of bringing this rook as well. Check, and then attacking from the 7th rank. I don't want to show the whole game. You can find this in the database. So this is not the rook endgame course. But what you should learn is how he first of all played this knight b5 move, then jumped to d6, and he took back with the queen, because sometimes you want to keep the d file semi-open so that you can attack the d7 pawn. Now, the US Championship is beginning in 25 minutes, and of course everybody wants to see it. I will not keep you here, so don't worry, we will finish before the moves begin. And of course I'm watching it myself. It's a great show to watch. What did you think about yesterday's games? About Jarebuk's victory? And also, who do you think will win now the event? If it's Wesley So and Yaroslav Jarebuk leading, will the other stars, Caruana and Nakamura, manage to catch them? There are still, of course, plenty of rounds left, but who do you think is in the best shape? Who do you think deserves to win this event the most? Let me know in the chat, or if you are watching on YouTube, in the comments, of course. And as I was saying, we will finish. We have 4 positions, but not whole games. So we will simply look at games played by, most of them are club players, so no famous players here, just some positions. All we care is the position. This we will see from the opening, because this is an opening that maybe some of you play. This is a very normal Sicilian, the Taimanov. And if in the Taimanov white plays knight b5, then there are 2 main responses. Of course d6, that's the most common, and it will often lead to the Maroczy setup. Or, like in the game, bishop c5 is also possible. Now, why do you think that knight d6 is not such a big thing in this position? How would you play here with black? Because yeah, we learned about the Octopus knight, but we also learned a few features that you might use when you are facing the Octopus knight. So how do you respond here with the black pieces? Oh, wow, I think I have only seen the good answer by one user. Let me win. He suggested king e7. I'm sorry if I missed somebody else, but I think I did not see anybody else saying king e7 because it is a surprising move, but it is the best move. So we have learned, I think it was two weeks ago when we discussed that you want to jump to d6, but you want to make sure that you can support the knight on d6. And the trouble with this position for white, not that this position is bad, but it's not an advantage because you cannot support the d6 knight, so you cannot push e5, and mainly that's the move that you want to play when you have a knight on d6. Right now it's hanging, this bishop is attacking the knight, and the king from e7 is attacking the knight. As funny as it sounds, it is an attacker right now, this king on e7. It is not a bad piece actually. Yes, he cannot castle, which sounds like scary, but in this position it is possible because the e file is not open and the d file is just a semi-open file, so the king is actually decent on e7. Later he could bring his knight to f6. Once the knight is not on d6, of course, you can bring your rook and go to f8 with the king if necessary. So it's not forever that you will keep your king on e7. And in this moment, you have to do something with the knight on d6. So knight takes c8 is a move that we said that we don't really want to play this move. You don't want to capture bishop that hasn't been developed. So yeah, unless you're winning a piece or something, don't capture this bishop. It's just, it's not developing. You are helping the opponent to develop his pieces. And yeah, the other move I wanted to show you is that there are some tactics here, and now that you have just played Banter Blitz with Miss Tactics, you have probably realized that king e7 is problematic because of knight takes f7. And now if king takes f7, woo, double attack. Queen h5, you have just won a pawn, ruined the opponent's castling, and you are winning back the piece. So everything is perfect for white. Trouble is, after knight takes f7, it's not obligatory to take back immediately. Black has an intermediate move that is bishop takes f2 check. It is a check, that's the problem. And after king takes, he also takes the piece. So it's equal material, both kings are bad. And yeah, this position is roughly equal, I think. So funny position it could have been, but the king e7 is still the right move because white cannot support his knight with e5. And bishop f4 is also not something that will solve white's problems forever. Also, because of the counterattack, so sometimes it's not only that, oh, I cannot defend the d6 knight properly. Maybe even if you manage, you might end up having some problems because black is also active. So this king on e7 is not bad in this position. After knight d6 check, the problem is that black took on d6, and now this position with the octo queen is an advantage for white. Quite a big advantage if you want to know. So even if you play something like queen e7 that I have seen being suggested, queen g3, attacking the g7 pawn, sometimes you will have to retreat your piece from the d6 square. But it's not only about keeping a piece on the d6 square, it's also the fact that you have exchanged black's dark squared bishop. Now that is huge because that is forever. You might not be able to keep your piece on d6, but he will never get back his bishop. This is a permanent hold, and not only the d6 square, every dark square in this position is a potential weakness because he doesn't have a bishop. He doesn't have a bishop to protect those squares. Now the g7 pawn is a target, and the d6 square is still a hole, and the c7 square, and many dark squares can be simply a weak square in his structure because he doesn't have the bishop. So that is forever, and that's why when the opponent plays knight d6, if you can kick the knight away with a move like king e7, do it. Of course, if the white pawn was already on f4 and he could play e5, that's a different story, but in this position king e7 is good. So bishop takes, queen takes, white is already having an advantage. And what happened later on? was that after queen e5, you should tell me what would you play here. This is one of the few questions that we have before we go on to the next position. So what do you do after queen e5? How to respond? Some funny suggestions there depending on which piece would land on d6, but it is true that you want to keep a piece on d6. So in order to do that, you need to protect the queen. I have seen knight b5 being suggested, which is not bad, but remember that when you land on d6 with a piece, you want to make sure that you can support it. So in this position, the trouble is that we cannot keep the knight on d6. It would be great if we could push e5. That would be the complete paralysis that we learned about the octopus. That's what we were aiming for, but we are just one move short. We cannot get that position. So not that this is bad, of course, this is also a position that you can play, but there is a better move here, not knight b5, but bishop f4. And now Black is forced to do something with the queen, so if he wants to trade, we have, you guys called it an octabishop or octashop. You can vote which one you prefer, so whether it's an octabishop or an octashop, we have it. And once again, this is a powerful beast. Different when it's a knight on d6 and different when it's a bishop. Both have their features, their special advantages. The bishop on d6, well, if you draw those arrows, you can see that mainly the trouble with this bishop, besides occupying the d6 square, besides not allowing the d pawn to advance and not allowing the bishop to develop comfortably, is that it is not allowing the king to castle. The bishop on d6 is cutting the black king, so this move, placing the bishop on d6, is against the king of the opponent. When the king is still on e8, having a bishop on d6 or even a bishop on a3. So sometimes if you can get rid of the opponent's bishop first, so first of all, make sure that you get rid of the opponent's dark squared bishop, and second, place your bishop on this diagonal. If his king is still on e8, this is huge. He cannot castle kingside, and if he has to castle queenside, that's also quite problematic with the bishop on d6. We will see a game where black is ending up almost being mated without queens on the board. So yeah, this is huge to have a bishop on d6. What happened in the game, I just want to show you briefly, was that white went on to get this pawn on b6, which is always great, of course, to win material. You know that I like pawns, but in this position I would have preferred to keep this bishop on d6, because I tell you, this is so annoying. So make sure that if you can, just keep your bishop on d6 and don't let the opponent's king move from e8. Let him castle queenside and then you see what happens. So for instance, f3, strengthening the e4 pawn, And if black castles, you play rook a3. Look at this rook lift, heading to b3, and then the b6 pawn can fall. So you are not in a rush capturing the weak pawn, but now this king is on c8. It is still cut, so don't think that just because black has castled, he's better, his king is safer. It is not safer. In a few moves you could give mate to this king. If you land the knight on b6, that's mate. So yeah, this position is problematic, very much problematic for black. I don't like so much bishop c7 because even though it wins material, it gives some activity for black. So black could have played knight b4 and then d5. So if you play with this d6 weakness in your position, try to push the d pawn. Of course, when there's a piece on d6, it's impossible, but this is the way to get free from the weak d6 square. To get rid of it, you should advance the d pawn. Pawn down for black, but active pieces, so it is somewhat compensating. Let's go to the next one because I want to show you two more positions before the US Championship begins. So here I will go directly to the position. No, actually this is once again an opening, so let's just go through it quick. This is a well-known position, you can check it. The main move is either d6 or bishop b4, because you know that when the bishop is out, knight d6 is not a big deal. You can always go king d7. This is not the same opening, but the same idea. Bishop out, you can play king e7. So instead of that, black went a6, and that is just weird because you are forcing the octopus. And now the octa queen. And after queen e7, of course, we want a piece on d6. So the octa bishop. I don't know which one sounds better, but there it goes. And once again, the king is on e8. Same story, different variation of the Sicilian, same problem. And what happened later is that they both castled queenside. And white started to attack on the queenside because, as I told you, if you have your knight getting to b6, it's a mate. So you have a mating attack without queens, just because you have a bishop, an octa bishop on d6. b4, of course, black doesn't want to allow the knight jump to a4, but this position is still great. You bring your king to b1 so that your rook can come to c1 if necessary, and you open the c5 by pushing c3. So this position is very good for white. And after knight e8, make sure that you never trade your piece for a piece that is worse than yours. So you see that this bishop is about to be captured. You don't want to give it up for a piece that is clumsy. Even if you have to abandon the d6 square, it is worth it because now the e8 knight is just bad. It will have to move again. It cannot stay on e8. It doesn't allow the d8 rook to move. It doesn't allow the h8 rook to be connected to the other rook. It's just bad. It's a tragedy, this knight on e8. So yeah, don't exchange a knight like that, ever. So either bishop g3 or bishop c5. This is all I wanted to say. We are not seeing how this game is finished. You can see it, you can find these games in the database. And one last position before I let the St. Louis team to take over. And this is this position. Now we have jumped the opening, I know. So bishop takes d6, and this is once again the same question. Both moves are good many times. So when you have a pawn, you can take back on d6 with the pawn. When you have a queen, you can take back with the queen. When you have both, up to you. It's really up to you, and that's what I want you to remember as a final note. That yes, we have learned that it's great to have a knight on d6. We have learned that it's great to have a pawn on d6. We have learned that it's great to have any other piece on d6, whether it's a queen, a bishop, or a rook, or a king. We did not see endgames, but it's possible. So any of these are great. Just make sure that you take advantage of this weakness in black's position. If you take back with the pawn, remember that you no longer have the semi-open d-file, and the d7 pawn is no longer a backward pawn. but it is still annoying to have this pawn on d6 because it takes away the c7 and the e7 squares, key squares for black. It paralyzes the d7 pawn, so it takes away lots of space from black. And who knows, maybe it's a potential pass pawn if you manage to take on c6 and get rid of the d7 pawn. So it's great to have this pawn, and you can grab lots of space by pushing your central pawns. Look at this position after e5. How clumsy this knight is on e8, the rook on f8, the queen can barely move as well. This is a sad position, and also you can take back with the queen, because then you have the semi-open d file, and even if you have to abandon the d6 square, it's not a problem. What you care about is the d7 backward pawn, bringing your heavy pieces to the d file, and then attacking this pawn. This game was over after queen d4 because black is losing the pawn. He could not do anything. He pushed d6 and tried to win back the pawn, but thanks to all these pins on the d file and also on the a3 f8 diagonal, this position is lost. We will push e5 next move. So if you want to see, black resigned here because e5 is coming, and this is over. I hope that you like the game selected, and once again, please forgive me for the technical clumsiness. Next week I'm on holiday, so there's no show. Miss Tactics will be here next Thursday, so don't go anywhere. She will be back, but I'm on holidays next week. I'll be back in 2 weeks, and thanks God, in 2 weeks, David from the Spanish side of Chess24 will be back here in Madrid, so he will help me to stream much better than how I do it alone. I once again apologize for that, and I wish you a great week and that you enjoy the show, the US Championship, right now beginning in St. Louis. Once again, let me know in the comments who do you think will win and who are you rooting for, both in the men's section and in the women's tournament. I will see you in 2 weeks' time with a much better visual experience. I promise.